Before we start, be sure to enter our competition to win a copy of Dark Side Detective. Thank you to the developers for sponsoring this competition. All you need to do to enter is subscribe and answer the question down below: what is the greatest Nintendo game of all time and why? Thanks guys, enjoy the review.
So, is this old man's journey a journey worth taking, or should the poor fella have stayed at home, feet up, tucking into a bag of Werther's Originals? Let's find out. At the outset, there is no story. Your character, the old man of the title, is given a letter and then leaves his home and sets out on his journey. You are given snippets of the story through flashbacks before all becomes clear by the end. I certainly won't spoil anything here, but what I do want to mention in the game's favour is just how well it tells its story without a single word. It manages to be emotive and clear with visuals alone, and for this the game should be commended. Not for what it starts as, but for what it becomes. I award story 18 out of 20. You can control the old man by moving the cursor and clicking where you want him to move, or by touching the screen if it's in handheld mode. I played in both docked and handheld mode, and using the controller could feel clunky at times, especially when trying to turn a lever, for example. There were no such issues at all in handheld mode. The main initiative of this game is that you can manipulate the scenery to help the old man along on his journey. Are the hills too high to traverse? Pull them down towards you. Can't reach that rooftop? Raise the nearby terrain to make stepping stones up to it. I knew absolutely nothing of this game going in and expected a traditional point and click adventure, or perhaps a visual novel, so to find out that it was an environmental puzzle game was a pleasant surprise. The aim of the game is to help the man along his journey using the aforementioned environmental puzzles until you trigger a cutscene where our character sits down and reminisces about his past. The cutscenes, along with the rest of the game, are beautifully drawn and look like watercolour paintings come to life. The puzzles are very simple for the most part, and probably won't take more than a couple of tries to solve. In fact, some of the puzzles seem impossible to fail. One where you are creating a path for a vehicle seemed ingenious in its design, until you realise that the vehicle would slow to a stop to allow you to complete the puzzle should it look like you were in danger of failing. The puzzles do increase in difficulty as the game goes on, but it's never hard. By the end of the game, the difficulty is about where I would have liked it to have been from the start. This may lead to some people declaring that the game is too easy, and they wouldn't necessarily be wrong, but I think the developers probably did this intentionally in order to keep the titular journey moving along at a nice pace. In a game that looks like a storybook, the equivalent of a mind-boggling puzzle that takes ages to solve would be someone gluing a couple of the pages together so that it was difficult to find out what would happen next. They have kept these pages glue-free, that's for sure. I think keeping the puzzles simple for a fair amount of the time was the right call in the context of this game, as the focus is very much on telling a beautiful story without words. Just be aware that if you are in it for the puzzles more than the story, they take a while to get out of second gear. The ideas are clever, if a little contrived, so gameplay gets a 13 out of 20.
Audio here is among the best I think I've ever heard in a video game. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks and the creaking of your boat as it sinks and swims, and even down to the sounds of the little clicks and taps as you move your character around, are all incredibly done. The music can go from eerie to mysterious to heartfelt, and really does add to the atmosphere of Old Man's Journey. It's one of very few games that I've played where I would say that the music and sound are almost perfect. The composer has just done a splendid job of capturing memories and emotions within really poignant and meaningful music. I give music 19 out of 20. In stark contrast to this is the longevity of the game. Now, while I wasn't expecting a huge adventure, I think 2 hours really is pushing the limits of value. And when you imagine that this game actually costs about half the price or less on mobile phones, I think it's a little bit of an insult to gamers that we're really paying that Nintendo Switch tax here. In terms of value, there really isn't much replayability. After the credits roll, don't expect any New Game Plus modes or any extra story to be unlockable. It really is the 1 2-hour campaign story, and then that's the end of the game. Now, while it was a pleasure to play through that one time, I think you're really struggling to draw the value out. It's for these reasons that I give a value score of 7. While the game is fun and really is an experience in itself, I think charging double just because it's on Nintendo Switch is a little bit of an insult. This brings me on to graphics. As an artist myself, I really appreciate when a developer goes out of their way to make a game beautiful. Old Man's Journey does that in a way that I haven't seen in a very, very long time. It carries with it an aesthetic of some type of oil painting or a watercolour blended together. The character animations, the backgrounds, the waves splashing in the foreground all add a certain charm to the game which is so often forgotten. It's understandable why this game has received so many accolades despite being such a short adventure. And the peaceful, relaxing artwork adds so much to this experience. I would give the visuals 17 out of 20.
To conclude, this game does a lot right. The visuals are absolutely stunning and remind me of pictures from an Anthony Brown book. If you are my sort of age, early, well, alright, mid-30s, you may remember these from school. The main characters were always gorillas. Anyway, I digress. As I was saying, the artwork is beautiful, as is the music. The puzzles are simple for the most part, and I was never stumped for more than maybe 5 minutes on one at a time. The whole game only takes around 2 hours to finish after all. This feels like one of those experience first and game second kind of deals, and it boils down to whether you see £8.99 for an evening's entertainment as value. I played through the whole game with my wife, and it was a similar experience to watching a movie together for a couple of hours. It could be an ideal game to play with a non-gamer, if that makes any sense.
And overall, despite the incredibly short runtime of only 2 hours, we still give Old Man's Journey 74% overall. It really is an experience not to be missed, and much as Glenn said, like a film, it's one that you're going to enjoy with a partner or a friend. That short runtime really is the only real issue I had with the game, and if it was only double the length, it would really be up in the 80s or 90s. Don't forget to enter our competition by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your answer to the question, what is the greatest Nintendo game of all time and why? Thanks again guys, keep it switch up, and we will see you on the next one.